Week 11, fantasy football wide receiver tier list rankings. Usually you're used to seeing Danny's mug when we're doing these videos, but he is in Cleveland going to a Cavaliers game, so I'll have you covered for both wide receivers and for running backs the next 2 days. We're not going to waste any time. If you guys enjoyed this video at any point, leave a like, really helps us out. Subscribe if you're new around here. Now let's get into it. All right, fellas, we're going to get things kicked off with the teams that are on bye this week. You guys can see on the screen there, Chris Olave, Michael Pittman Jr., Drake London, Demario Douglas, and Josh Downs not available for fantasy football lineups this week, so we are going to have to dig a little bit deeper. Now let's get into the will they play tier. So this is where we talk about the major injuries. Obviously I'm recording this on Friday morning, so there's going to be stuff that comes out afterwards. I will be sure to update the pinned comment down below with any updates to injury reports and stuff that we get on today's injury reports. So not a ton of injury complications this week, just a couple guys that we have to go over. Obviously, T. Higgins was already out for Thursday Night Football. He did not play. Hopefully, we get him back next week with the mini bye week that you have in between Thursday Night Football. The big names here, though, are Justin Jefferson, for starters, been out back since week 7 with a hamstring injury per ESPN's Kevin Seifert. Still ramping up, but an uphill battle for him to play this coming week. So it looks like we will be without Justin Jefferson one more game, and he should be back next week most likely. So if you have Justin Jefferson, it looks like you're going to have to wait one more week. And then the other major injury question marks we have here, Tyler Lockett, who would be in the wide receiver 3 flex play kind of area if he were not out. He has not practiced Wednesday or Thursday with a hamstring injury. He is not trending well, especially knowing that he's a little bit of an older wide receiver. I think Tyler Lockett is likely going to be out if I had to guess right now, had to make the distinction today. Like I said, I will post any updates down below. And if he does play, he would be in the flex players tier at wide receiver 33. But for now, I'm probably going to assume that he's going to be out, and that would obviously upgrade DK Metcalf. It would upgrade JSN into the top 40 range as well. Noah Brown, who also has been absolutely on fire recently, has not practiced either Wednesday or Thursday for the Houston Texans with a knee injury. He has an excellent matchup, but if Collins plays, that throws a wrench into Noah Brown's workload, and also we don't know what his snap share will look like if he's not 100%. So with Noah Brown, I'd say you're probably not wanting to start Noah Brown or at least rely on Noah Brown this week, but if he does log a full participation in Friday practices today and he's a full go, he would be wide receiver 39 in my rankings right now. So of course, again, check the pinned comment for any injury updates. We did get word today that Garrett Wilson is also dealing with an elbow injury. Looks like he's still going to play, but it's possible that requires an update, and I will update that down below in the comments as well. So let's get into the actual wide receiver tier list. I'm going to be going through my top 36 wide receivers. Just kind of skimming through the first 12 guys, talking about who has a good matchup, bad matchup, and high-scoring games as I do for the running back videos, and highlighting a couple of the recent usage trends we've seen from those guys, but mostly focusing in depth on wide receiver 13 to 36, because I'm sure a lot of you guys have start-sit decisions in that range, and that's the goal of this video. We're trying to help you guys set your lineup. So wide receivers 1 to 12 here. We have a couple wide receivers with great matchups: Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, Garrett Wilson, who, like I said, could be dealing with some injuries, but if he's a full go, he has a great matchup. Devontae Adams and Mike Evans there. And then some guys that are in high-scoring games. We have Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Ayuk, and Mike Evans in that 49ers-Buccaneers game, and then Devontae Adams as well. And then some guys that have bad matchups, so maybe we want to temper expectation for these guys this week. Of course, Jamar Chase, who played yesterday, bad matchup, plus no Joe Burrow for half that game. He obviously didn't perform at a super high level, did score a garbage time touchdown, though, for you. And then CeeDee Lamb, who's been outstanding the last couple games, he has a tougher matchup this week than he has had in recent weeks, going up against the Carolina Panthers. A.J. Brown against the Chiefs, shadow coverage from L'Jarius Sneed, as I'll talk about later. Not a great matchup for him. Stephon Diggs against the Jets. Their corners are absolutely locked down guys, so that's not a great matchup. And then Keenan Allen going up against the Packers, also not a great matchup. So those are the top end guys. I'm going to highlight a few of them, just their recent usage. My wide receiver 5 is Cooper Kupp. I've talked about him as a buy low in recent weeks. I talked about him on Wednesday as a buy low because Matthew Stafford is back. Cooper Kupp is averaging 21% receptions per route run, not targets, receptions per route run this season. Only Tyreek Hill has been at that level of dominance of his team's offense. The Seahawks are a good secondary. They have some good corners, but I do like the Rams to put up points with Matthew Stafford back in the fold. Maybe even win this one outright if you guys are betting this game. Buy low on Cooper Kupp right now. He is a top 5 receiver for me this week. Wide receiver 9 for me is Brandon Ayuk. The reason I'm highlighting Brandon Ayuk here is because I think the explosion is coming here. You can see his last couple games, 10, 12, 11, 16, 15 PPR points. He's been fine, but he hasn't been outstanding. And I know my Buccaneers defense pretty well, and they will struggle with an explosive wide receiver like Brandon Ayuk. 28% target share, 46% of the team's air yards. He hasn't gone over 16 PPR points since back in week 4. It is coming, though. I promise you. The usage is that of a wide receiver 1, an elite wide receiver 1 at that. He plays for an elite offense with the San Francisco 49ers, so you definitely need to buy low on Brandon Ayuk before it is too late. And then finally, of this tier that I want to highlight is wide receiver 10 for me in Garrett Wilson. Like I said, a guy I feel really good about right now, despite the injury, assuming he's a full go. 15-plus PPR points in 4 straight games, double-digit targets in 4 of his last 5 games as well. The last time Wilson had a big kind of performance was back in week 1 when they played the Buffalo Bills the first time, and that was a Buffalo Bills defense that had Tre'Davious White, that had Matt Milano and all their studs. So I do think we're going to be getting a good setup for a good Garrett Wilson game this week. So definitely go buy low on him before it is too late as well. So those are the top-end wide receivers. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty players that you guys are deciding between in your fantasy football lineup. So let's kick things off in the high-end wide receiver 2s tier here with my wide receiver 13, which is Christian Kirk. The Jaguars' passing offense has the stone easiest matchup in the NFL this week against the Tennessee Titans. So they have been horrible against fantasy wide receivers. Kirk has by far been the number 1 receiver of this team, given the usage of him versus Calvin Ridley. He's got a 23% target share. He gets most of the 3rd and 4th down targets. He's used more likely in red zone situations as well. Christian Kirk has been a great option so far this season. Hopefully we finally get a big performance out of Trevor Lawrence and this passing game. We're setting up for a good one because the Titans are bad against the pass, but we haven't yet seen that from either Trevor Lawrence or Calvin Ridley, but Christian Kirk has been consistently a solid PPR option. So I do really like him this week as a great, 7 for 90 type of floor. Like I think that's the floor projection you're getting out of Christian Kirk. So I really like him this week. Number 14 for me on the week is Jalen Waddle, and he's been a little bit frustrating. If you guys drafted Jalen Waddle, he's been off and on banged up all season because the Dolphins offense has been cooking. And you expect when the Dolphins offense is cooking like that, you'd expect Jalen Waddle to be really great this season. And it honestly just hasn't really aligned for him yet. He's had one big game, but pretty much has been like solid ever other than that game. Everyone is now back healthy after the Dolphins bye. We have Devon Achane back. We have, Mostert's obviously there. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are obviously there. I do think that we could see the start of Jalen Waddle really turning it on down the backstretch of the season. The Raiders rank bottom 12 in DVOA against opposing number 1s and number 2 wide receivers. So both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle with a great matchup this week. The Dolphins are implied for 30 points on the slate, which is the highest per Vegas of any team. Got to get him into your starting lineups this week, and also a guy that I'd probably be sending out some offers for as well. Speaking of sending out some offers for guys, Puka Nacua is my wide receiver 15 this week. 5, 12, 6, and 7 targets since Cooper Kupp has returned from injury. And just like I said for Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford is back. So that is all that matters. These two guys dominate their team's targets. A 31% target share over the first 9 games of Puka Nacua's rookie season is an absurd number, and it needs to be treated with legitimate respect. If your league mates are not valuing Puka Nacua as the mid wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 2 that he is for me rest of the season, then you need to be sending out some offers. Try and sell high on guys like Tank Dell and Adam Thielen and some of the guys that I'm going to talk about a little later in this video. Wide receiver 16 for me on the week is Devontae Smith. And like Jalen Waddle, Smith has been a little bit frustrating, mainly due to the sheer dominance of the number 1 receiver there in Philadelphia. Same goes for the number 1 receiver in Miami. A.J. Brown has taken over the target share battle between him and Devontae Smith. It's 33% for A.J. Brown, 21% for Devontae Smith, which is a lot further than it was last year. But with Dallas Goedert now out for a while, a tough matchup for A.J. Brown this week against L'Jarius Sneed in shadow coverage. This could be a nice performance to get back on track for Devontae Smith and have, a great back half of the season. Jalen Hurts had a bye week to get a little bit healthier as well, so hopefully the big plays can be there, and maybe the bye helps with that for Devontae Smith, because we don't know if he was dealing with something nagging as well. So really like Devontae Smith this week. Marquise Brown, my wide receiver 17 on the slate, one of the best buys in all of fantasy, and it seems like I'm just parroting buy low on all of these guys, but they really all are good buy lows. 6th best remaining strength of schedule for the Arizona Cardinals wide receivers, third best through the fantasy playoffs, and a potential shootout in week 17 versus the Eagles. So with Kyler Murray back and this offense showing signs of life all of a sudden, Marquise Brown basically has the same usage as Brandon Ayuk does. The only difference is that he's not on as good of an offense as Brandon Ayuk, and also he has way less competition for targets, and he's way cheaper to go after in a trade right now. You guys can see the usage is very comparable to what I said with Brandon Ayuk. 27% of the targets, 41% of the air yards, 28% of the end zone targets, 32% of the third and fourth down targets. The difference is 11.7 PPR points per game versus like 15 points per game, which is what Brandon Ayuk is giving you. This is the highest over-under of any game on the slate, this Texans and Cardinals game, and the window to buy Marquise Brown might slam shut after this week because he's caught less than 5 passes in 5 of his last 6 games, and we've already seen him once with Kyler Murray, and he didn't have a big performance. So I think this is the premier time to buy low on Marquise Brown, and you are definitely going to want to start him this week against the Texans. So DJ Moore is my wide receiver 18 closing out this tier. Again, it feels like I'm just parroting buy low on all these guys, but they really all are good buy lows. Wide receiver 6 in points per game was DJ Moore from weeks 1 to 7 when Justin Fields was on the field. And he had a couple explosion games that obviously aided that, but that's what DJ Moore can give you. 10, 8, and 11 PPR points are the last 3 games without Justin Fields. I think that DJ Moore is a low-end wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season, and he has the Lions this week in a 48-point over-under game. The Lions are the 22nd best defense against fantasy wide receivers. This could be a big-time breakout game for DJ Moore in a couple weeks because he hasn't really had a big game since that Thursday nighter when Justin Fields got injured. So I really like DJ Moore to get back on track this week. So low-end wide receiver 2s, and I promise I will stop talking about buy lows and glazing these players to death, but Adam Thielen is my wide receiver 19. He is a sell high, so he is not a buy low in my opinion. I think a lot of people will view him as a buy low because if you look at the game logs, he was so consistent from week 2 to week 8, and then he's had a couple down games with 8 PPR points in week 9, 10 PPR points in week 10, but I actually think he is a sell high for precisely the reason that people are going to buy low on him. I don't think this is a stable asset rest of the season. I don't think that you should count on a guy who's playing for a team that's on track to have the first overall pick, and they're an anemic offense scoring the 28th most points per game. He's also old, and a nagging injury could really disrupt his season. So for me, I can go from Adam Thielen to Marquise Brown, no problem. So I'm going to do that. I can go from Adam Thielen plus to a Jalen Waddle or to a Devontae Smith, potentially to a Puka Nacua. So if you can take advantage of what Adam Thielen has done for you this season and try and sell high on that and try and get a guy that has a better aligned schedule and a better aligned situation to sun run the rest of the season, I don't think Adam Thielen will be that guy for you. So definitely try and sell high on him, but he is still a good start this week. Even though the Cowboys are a tough defense, he's clearly the number 1 wide receiver there. So I have my wide receiver 19. Wide receiver 20 on the week for me. Tank Dell has 4 games over 19 PPR points this season, which is great for my 12% Tank Dell best ball shares, but CJ Stroud is going to have some down games coming up. He's been absolutely on fuego the last couple weeks. There's suddenly a lot of target competition there with Nico Collins coming back, Noah Brown emerging, Dalton Schultz here and there getting some targets. Don't get me wrong though, like Tank Dell is a really good wide receiver 3 flex option rest of the season, but again, similar to Adam Thielen, I would love to cash out on what he's already done. There's a good chance that your league mates view him as a mid wide receiver 2 or a low end wide receiver 2, and I would rather try and sell Tank Dell for a guy like Marquise Brown, like Jalen Waddle, like Devontae Smith, like Puka Nacua, like DJ Moore, maybe plus. The Cardinals are dead last against opposing number 1 wide receivers, so Tank Dell has yet another good matchup again this week, so maybe you want to wait one more week, but I will say the time is ticking for Tank Dell to sell high on. He's a great receiver rest of the season, and he could legit be an every week starter, but I just think you can use him right now to go up and get somebody a little bit more stable. So wide receiver 21 for me in my rankings is Deebo Samuel. He has been inconsistent as hell this year, mainly due to the fact that Christian McCaffrey eats into his rushing work, Brandon Ayuk eats into his wide receiver work, and they've completely limited him to a boomer bust wide receiver option. But this week sets up to be a boom spot, right? Because the Bucs defense has been decimated by Brock Purdy in the past, the first time they played last year. They're currently 29th against fantasy football wide receivers and adjusted fantasy points allowed. Bottom line is you want to start every 49ers player that you have. McCaffrey, Ayuk, Kittle, Deebo Samuel, they're all in your starting lineup because 2 or 3 of these guys will probably crush. We don't know which 2 or 3 because that's the nature of the 49ers offense, but I really do think that you could get a monster performance out of Deebo, and that's why I want to put him into my lineup this week. So wide receiver 22 for me in my rankings here is Terry McLaurin. The Giants rank 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. This this one is at home for Washington, unlike a few weeks ago when they played the Giants. It was a 14-7 drizzler. Regardless, Terry McLaurin went for 90 yards in that game and had 9 targets. So with Sam Howell making some big improvements in recent weeks, taking less sacks, being a little bit better with the football, I love the Howell-McLaurin stack this week if you guys are playing DFS potentially, or if you're just betting on the game. I think McLaurin is a really, really good option this week and a really underrated option this week as well. Number 23 for me, and I pretty much enjoy punishment with this statement, so I'm ranking Calvin Ridley high yet again. But this is the last straw for him. As I talked about with Christian Kirk, this is the easiest matchup for wide receivers on the entire slate. So if Calvin Ridley can't figure it out here, he's probably never going to figure it out. An absolutely wild stat also, which kind of just proves how unlucky Calvin Ridley has been this season, is that he leads all wide receivers in pass interference penalties drawn. Every time he has an opportunity to make a big play, the guy's drawing PI calls, which is great for his team, but it's not good for his bottom line and his fantasy production. He's getting pretty unlucky, but he definitely has to produce this week. No excuses. I still think he's a good play, but if you don't want to play him because he's been, terrible this season, I don't blame you. I just think process-wise, you have to put him into your lineup and trust that the Jags can actually get something going in their passing offense. So closing out this tier, we have Jordan Addison, who is my wide receiver 24. Looks like I already talked about we will be without Justin Jefferson for one more game. Jordan Addison has at least 7 targets in every game since Justin Jefferson has been out. And this week, the Broncos are the 21st easiest matchup in the league for fantasy wide receivers on Sunday Night Football. This could be a sneaky high-scoring game as well. So I do really like Jordan Addison this week to have potentially a big play, find the end zone. We know what Jordan Addison is capable of doing. So that closes out the wide receiver 2s territory. We're going to get into the wide receiver 3s now. We have DK Metcalf kicking it off at wide receiver 25. He is wide receiver 38 on the season, which is really disappointing because if you've been watching the Seahawks and you know the usage for DK Metcalf, he has averaged 9 targets per game over the last 4 weeks. So this is a guy that is getting legit wide receiver 1 alpha usage, but he can't get any big plays going. He can't cash in on some of these deep targets, and I refuse to rank DK Metcalf higher than like a wide receiver 3 until he actually shows something like that, because he just literally has not been performing at an elite level. Maybe if Tyler Lockett is out, that'll help a little bit, but to be honest, one finish inside the top 24 in points per game since week 4 is not getting it done, and that's why I have him ranked down here at wide receiver 25. He just has not been performing at a high level, and he has a tougher matchup this week against the Rams as well. So wide receiver 26 for me is DeAndre Hopkins, and he's been uber consistent from a target share standpoint, but at least unlike Metcalf, we've seen the spike performances. The problem is the Titans offense is not good enough to be able to get him there for fantasy each and every week. Even though he's getting the targets that say he should get there each and every week, the Jags are a tough matchup this week. The Will Levis experience has kind of been up and down so far, and I think that they're going to completely shut down Derrick Henry, unlike what we've normally seen from Jacksonville facing Derrick Henry. They have a really good run defense this year. I'm really worried for DeAndre Hopkins this week. He's still a solid play, but he's definitely not well set up to have a monster performance because the Titans could, probably get romped in this game, especially after a tough loss that Jacksonville sustained last week. So wide receiver 27 and 28, I can just group them together because they've already played. Zay Flowers and Tyler Boyd, this is where I had these guys ranked. Zay Flowers had a monster touchdown called back due to a bullshit holding penalty on Odell Beckham Jr., and he also couldn't get his feet down on another touchdown that he could have had there because he could have had a monster game. It's really frustrating to watch last night if you had Zay Flowers, but had an okay performance, I suppose. Tyler Boyd was on his way to a solid game, but of course Joe Burrow getting injured really put a damper on that, as did it for Jamar Chase as well. So just a measly 5.5 PPR points total out of Tyler Boyd. Unfortunately, I played him in my home league last night, so I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball. So wide receiver 29 here is Amari Cooper. I talked about Amari Cooper as a tough option this week on the Matchups That Matter show because for a variety of factors, things just don't line up well for him. He has shadow coverage against Joey Porter, who's been really good this season in shadow coverage. It's a 33-point over-under, which is one of the lowest over-unders the entire season so far, and he has Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback. Just not good all around for Amari Cooper. But he is still a clear alpha wide receiver, so definitely still in starter consideration, but not a must-start necessarily like you would think Amari Cooper would be, given his workload, given his target share, and given what he's done the last 2 years that he's been in Cleveland now. So number 30 for me on my rankings here is Nico Collins, and I think I'm basically just projecting him to play because technically he is probably questionable, but I think he'll be a full go. He's listed limited practices on Wednesday and on Thursday. He had a solid week of rest last week, week because he didn't play. 49-point over-under against the Arizona Cardinals, as I talked about for Tank Dell. 32nd ranked defense in DVOA against opposing number ones. He and Tank are like co-number one wide receivers, so it's good news for both of those guys. But I think Nico Collins probably slides up even a little bit if we know he is a full go. I expect him to play. I think he's a top probably 25, 26 play if he is 100% ready to go. So I'm tentatively ranking him here at wide receiver 30. So closing out this video, let's rapid fire some of the deeper league flex plays. This is going to close out my top 36 rankings. Of course, if you want access to my running back rankings, my quarterback rankings, my tight end rankings, my DST rankings for week 11 fantasy football to help set your fantasy football lineups, definitely be sure to go check out flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off. Over there, you'll get access to all of our bonus content. So our weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, matchup charts, strength of schedule stuff, dynasty rankings, bonus content from us, as well as all of our partners over there on Flock Fantasy. Mason, Zach, and Badake, the domain guys, the endgame guys, we've all teamed up to give you guys a great product. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But closing out this video, deeper league flex plays, wide receiver 31 for me is Chris Godwin. Potentially high scoring game, 22% target share on the year. He's a decent option in PPR leagues. Wide receiver 32, Cortland Sutton. Also potentially a high scoring game, but he does have a tough matchup against the Minnesota Vikings secondary. Otherwise, I would have him ranked higher than this. Wide receiver 33 for me on the week is Rashee Rice. The Eagles are really susceptible to wide receivers. Hopefully, we see Rashee Rice get a post-bye rookie bump in terms of his overall routes run because his targets have been really good. 24% targets per route run. He's just only running like 55, 60, 70% of the Kansas City Chiefs routes, even though he's been by far their best wide receiver this season. Wide receiver 34 for me on the week is Jacoby Myers. The targets have really dipped recently because he started out the season white hot, getting a lot of targets, but it is a top 12 matchup for the Raiders wide receivers in probably a pass-heavy game script because we know the high-flying Dolphins will probably put up points on the other side of the ball. Maybe it's going to be a boat race, and then the whole second half of the game, the Raiders are just trying to play catch-up, and we get some garbage time from Jacoby Myers. Either way, I think he's a pretty solid play. Wide receiver 35 for me and wide receiver 36 both play for the same team. We have Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. Solid target share for Deontay Johnson since he's been back from his hamstring injury, but like I said earlier, it's a 33-point over-under in this game, and it's the best pass defense in the NFL. And basically same argument for George Pickens, only he doesn't get as many targets as Deontay Johnson. So that is my top 36 wide receivers. If I helped you set your fantasy football lineup, leave me a like down below. Subscribe to this channel if you guys are new around here. We'll have you covered everything fantasy football. We're going to have an exciting video either later today or tomorrow with Matt Harmon talking about his in-season rookie report for dynasty purposes. So if you guys are curious about how these rookie wide receivers are progressing, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice, Josh Downs, all of those guys, he will have that for us later on today or tomorrow, depending on when I get it out. So make sure you stay tuned, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Running backs will be coming tomorrow. Make sure to check that out if you guys are interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.